welcome to another episode with Jason and Bart. Oh, wow, I changed the beginning of it again.
You did.
Hey, man,
You did.
sometimes you just gotta fly
Look,
with
new
it.
year, new intro, right? I mean,
I
that's
guess. No,
I like it.
I'll make a nice one at some point, but this
I
is more
like
fun
it.
this way.
I
Yeah,
like it.
Jason, how was your New Year's?
Holidays were good, low key, always good. Somehow was able to stay healthy. I came back to work this week, and a lot of people are sick with all kinds of
Mm-hmm.
things. As I
Yeah,
sniffle, but
but the
yeah,
weather
so
doesn't help. It's 63 degrees outside right now.
that is definitely a little bit of an issue. No, it was good, man. We actually had one of our partners from work come over from Europe with his wife, and he hadn't been to New York before, so I was able to take them out and
Cool.
drop them off well before New Year's here in New
Yeah,
York on Saturday because I
it's
wanted
always
no part
the
of that.
yeah. I mean, holidays in New York are always fun if you get to do it.
Yeah, yeah,
But only once.
right. It's like exactly, and like I think her New York City like experience in her mind at Christmas was from like Home Alone 2,
Yeah,
which is like okay, it's a good reference, but it's a super old movie, right? I mean, it's 30 years old or whatever. So yeah, I'd say
yeah,
New York has changed slightly.
just a
Um,
little bit.
but anyway, and you, and how was yours, sir?
Very
Fine,
quiet,
sir.
which I'm good. I'm okay with that. It was
Yeah,
really
nothing
chill.
wrong with that.
So
Good. Well, hope
yeah,
all
I
the
mean, work things were all over the place a little bit, but that's just expected. But here we are. It's a new
here we are.
year. We're just rocking and rolling now. So, Jason, what topic do you have? Speaking of communications, wow, just segue that one. Well,
Oh, so you're gonna make this like this is my topic for the day. See, I stole this from
well,
you.
technically, let's be fair. It is your topic for the day because you told me the topic, and then
That's
I
true.
said, "Hey, you probably got it from the LinkedIn post I wrote." But
Sure
by the
did, by the
way,
way.
it's actually from an old podcast that you said, and it's your quote. So it is actually your topic.
Which I didn't know at the time, but that was very meta what you just did there. Yeah. Yeah, we wanted to talk a little bit about not just communication on the team, but also I think and I thought you wrote it well in your post about promoting communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the frustrations I think leaders find themselves in a lot is there's so much emphasis focused on us communicating to the team. But I think
Mm-hmm.
promoting communication is really about having the team probably do more communicating back to us. And I was having this conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago about the term communication. And I was saying, like, I think a lot of people mistake it for talking.
Right.
And it's not. It's a combination of talking and listening. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
listening part is actually way more important. So we're going to talk a little bit about promoting communication on the team, on your team. And I guess the first place I wanted to start was just sort of, from the operational side, the ecosystem of tools and processes and so on and so forth. Anything out there that you've seen that's helped to
Um.
promote? And again, we're not looking for necessarily like trying to promote a product. I'm just saying, like, how have you generally seen it or set up your communication ecosystem?
So I think it comes down to just people and how they communicate, right? Like how in this day and age, written communication is so important. Even though we talk to clients all the time, I think written's so
Sure.
big, especially in development world and putting tickets together and stuff like that. We use Slack. We do not use email for the project stuff or everyday things. And just that's just built in. We started with Basecamp and all that stuff. We're all Atlassian tools now for clients, but
Mhm.
um, very Slack oriented at the moment when things are going on. We also don't, kind of expect people to like reply right away.
Yeah.
We're also spread out in multiple time zones, so we kind of figured that a little bit out. But it's also daily struggle too. I think there's more communication going on inside of Jira and tickets than anything else.
Sure.
Um, but we also have a daily stand up every morning with the development team. And that's just checking up on them and what's going on and if they have any blockers and things like that. And then we actually instituted a weekly US team sort of thing, but that's only we don't do any really like here's what happened. We
Mhm.
actually took that away. It is our catch up. It's like, hey, what does everybody did this week, or fun facts, or kind of trying to get a little bit of the office vibe back in.
Sure.
Because what we used to do, like, I made people go to lunch every single day, or at least as much as we could, and that was a good time to, like, for an hour to chit chat, and hey, this happened to, or my family this or whatever. You made it a little more, and to made everybody take a break for a little bit. Right now it's only once a week. I don't know what we're gonna do with that yet. But that's kind
Yeah.
of where we are right now. It's just everybody's trying to figure out what's happening, right? We used to be so, even though the company was built remote, we had an office for a
Right.
while or for a long time, and we were, made it
Yeah.
easier. But
Well,
now
I
we're
think
sort of,
that's what these ecosystems of tools really are doing right at this point. What they're trying to
Mhm.
do is they're trying to synthesize the in-office experience, right? And I think for leaders and owners and operators, I think a lot of the onus is on us to be innovative and creative around, like, it doesn't really matter what the specific tools you use are less important, right, than
Mhm.
how are you using those tools for specific types of communication. And I think being able to uh, be intentional and articulate the intentionality of, we use email for this, we use Slack for this, is really important. And I don't want to spend all day on tools, because we could do that, but I don't want to spend all day on tools today. I will say the last thing about tools I will say is, and this is because I'm probably just freaking old, but I think calendar is one of the most underused and underestimated tools out there in terms of communicating. Because again, communication is not always about words. It's not always about like having to
Yeah,
talk and listen.
yeah.
Communication, especially in a remote environment, I will say, really, really important. I think, and again, you don't have to use calendar, but for me, again, because I'm an old guy, like I love calendar. It's a really easy
So
way for us to communicate with each other about where we are. Because also we're very flexible on hours. Like we don't really have like, oh, you're at your desk from 9 to 5. It's we're
Mhm.
very hands off when it comes to um, the team. And I think with remote work, you don't really have a choice unless you're going to spend your whole life over people's shoulders. Remote is impossible.
Funny say thing about calendar. It is one of those things that drive me off the deep end sometimes. Um, I am calendar when it comes to counting. I have a huge problem when people don't use it properly
Yeah, me
or
too.
do invites properly. Meaning that if you look at my calendar and you go, I'm just going to invite you to this meeting and send me an invite without telling me what's going on, you're going to get rejected really quickly. Everybody knows
Yeah,
that, and
100%.
our company sort of culture is like this too. And I hate
Mhm.
when clients do it. It just drives me off the wall.
Right. Well,
Like,
you can't
you
control them,
didn't
but you
ask.
can control your own. Yeah.
Right, but we can control them too because it's just like what you put out there, right? It's like all these big companies got taught like, oh, we're just like, oh, it's on your empty calendar. I'm just going to put myself into it. You're like, did you just see 10 hours of meetings and I haven't gone to the bathroom yet? Why are you slotting yourself into any of these things without asking? That to
Mhm.
me still comes from big corporate world, and I'm like, don't do that. That is just insane to me.
Yeah.
We have so
Well,
many
that's
tools
the
to
downside.
elevate that, right?
And that's the downside of like stuff like Calendly, right? Because anytime they see a blank spot, they just assuming you're free, but not all free time is created equally. I think the next thing I wanted to talk about a little bit in terms of communication and promoting it is understanding that you and I think you touched on it a little bit earlier. You've got different personalities on your teams.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody is a blabbermouth, extrovert.
Or
Some
wants to be on
people,
camera.
right, or who want to be on camera and be divas all day long, 100%, right. But I think that real management in a remote environment is really hard, and it is about getting to know each individual as an individual and who you're actually responsible for managing. Because again, not everybody does communicate similarly. I think you can put standards in place for how we communicate in terms of
Mm-hmm.
or when we communicate or where we communicate, but
Right.
uh, to take back what I just said there, how is very different depending on who you're talking to. So um, I think as you're running things as a manager, certainly within your business, and this goes for managing people all up and down the organization, I would say also, um, is how do they communicate the most effectively with you. And I think a lot of that again starts with um, listening and giving and making sure that they also know that they're in a space where they like, I hate this term, like making sure they know they're in a safe space, but I think it is important to sort of demonstrate that, like, being transparent, being communicative is part of if it is part of your culture, if this is what you want in your business, then this kind of thing has to be demonstrated first by you, and that allows them to open up. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I believe so. It's we got built a certain way, so we kind of have this kind of built into our world, so we know how to communicate a lot more. But having new people come on board, it's hard to learn their sort of who they are, what they do, how they communicate. You kind of get, we try to spend as much as time with them, especially new ones. So yeah, it's it's always hard, right? Like if I had it my way, I would be in office all the time with all my team, right? Because that's how I like it. I like being around people. Doesn't mean that's best for them.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I mean is, me, and I'm kind of like, I will talk and distract the hell out of you just because I like people, right? It doesn't mean the work is going to get done if I'm keeping distracting people, right? Like, so I guess that's part of it. And it's just, you just got to learn those little things that people like to do or not do, and be common, especially in this environment where it's like half the people are like, no, I never want to back to office. Great. The
Yeah.
other half is like, we always want to be in the office. I'm like, okay, great. And the
I think
third
you've
is
got
like,
to remember. I think you got to remember that they're people too. Like, there is no monolith here. Right? Everybody's going to come with their own individual styles and their own
yeah,
individual insecurities and weaknesses and strengths. And I think it would be super easy if everybody was an avatar, right? Shout out to James Cameron. Like, I'm sure everybody wishes like Chat GPT could do everything for them right now. But at the end of the day, our businesses are about people. They're
yeah,
for
it's all
people.
about
They're
people.
run by people.
Mhm.
And for the time being, at least, we'll see how long that lasts. People are still at the core of everything that we're doing, right? Um,
Yeah, it's
I
just,
would say, yeah, go ahead.
I think communicating, it's over communicating in this environment is very important, right? No matter what you do. Um, and as much as sometimes I'm like, there's people on my team that write really long emails, and I'm like, it could have been 3 sentences, but then I look at it and go, well, wait a minute, that could be construed as something else than what really it is and what's
Mhm.
supposed to be, right? I have those moments where I'm like, shorter is better sometimes, but doesn't mean that that's better in email or better in a Slack message, or
Mhm.
because people don't understand tone, and there's not a lot of people that can read it off a Slack message or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And some people are just not good at it in person, right? A good salesperson and a biz dev person, or what we do, we all have it kind of built into us because that's our character.
Right. A
Our
lot of
job is
developers,
reading,
on the other hand, aren't built like that.
right? And that's just a big generalization. Some of them are really good at it,
That is a
but
huge generalization, by the way, for everybody out there.
nothing against it. Like, that's just the
Don't yell at
world
me.
rolls on that way, right? But I know I can read a person pretty good. And over the years, when you learn that skill, you can kind of read it what they're writing and who they
Yeah,
are.
I think a lot of times, like, leaders also, they make the mistake of it's actually their own shortcoming because they can only communicate in one particular style, and their particular communication style may not work with everybody that they're working with. And so sometimes what I hear is like, oh, well, this person I just can't communicate with them. They just never understand what I'm saying. Right. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's always like, yeah, I hear you, but like, how hard have you tried to try different things with this person? Like,
Yeah.
and also, like, have you made time to really
Right.
get to know not just what they do at your company,
Mhm.
who they are as a human being? Again, taking it back to that human level, making that time. I think, again, if you're a leader, part of your job is, and this is really hard to do, by the way, you were mentioning about it in hybrid or remote, but really getting to know people. Because one of the
Mhm.
advantages of being in person is you can have people go to lunch every day, and you can have people go grab a drink after work, and you can do all those things. You can chat at the water cooler, the proverbial water
Yeah.
cooler. But in a remote environment, that's a lot harder. So making the time on your calendar, and this is something I've done with our teams a lot. I have open doors constantly. I'm finding people who feel like I haven't spoken to for a while in the company, finding ways to reach out to them and really trying to make the time to learn. And again, the agendas are never about, I very rarely am in one of these meetings with somebody where we actually wind up talking about work, or the intention is to talk about work. Sometimes we
Yeah.
slide into it, right? But the other day, I want to know who you are and how do you
Yep.
talk about whatever it is you're talking about, which, unlike what I'm doing right now, means I listen a lot more than I talk.
Yeah, funny you say that, because just looking at and thinking about it, I have weird tricks for this stuff. Not having those very specific meetings, um, but we have some channels in our Slack that are very like non-work related. There's sports ball, there's other things going on, obviously some
Mm-hmm.
political stuff, but so that you kind of understand people like from that perspective. But the other thing is, and it's funny because I do it and I don't realize I do it, is randomly I will show up on a meeting, or randomly I will show up on a stand up, and nobody cares I'm there. It's more of like I'm just there, you know what I mean? And I don't say anything. It's watching people communicate and what they're saying and how they're saying it. Right? It's
Right.
really the how they're saying. Or I'll jump in and look at a ticket, or I look at the Slack channel for production. Look at how they're actually communicating. And I don't respond to anything. There's nothing to do. Just looking. And it's not that like you're checking up on them. It's more of learning how they're actually communicating what they're writing. That is it.
Oh,
Like,
look,
it's
sometimes
funny. I do it all the time, and I don't realize I'm doing it till we
I
just
look,
talk.
I definitely stalk the channel sometimes. First of all, it's a great way to see, to get a pulse on not just how work is going, but what's the pulse of the team, which I think is really important.
Mhm.
Um, you also get to see how people communicate under different levels of stress and
Oh,
pressure,
yeah.
which is hugely important, because I think under those circumstances, they probably reveal more about who they are and how they communicate by default, or how they organically default communicate. I think those are really great learning experiences, right?
Yep.
But yeah. So we're talking about listening. I think that this is one of the huge keys. Is there's this tendency for leaders to walk into a room and go, well, these people don't have as much experience as I do in solving this, because I've been doing this for 15 years, and therefore blah, blah. And you take all the air out of the room. And I think one of the ways that you can stifle communication as opposed to promoting it is be the know-it-all leader. Even if you know the answer, honestly, it's better for your business sometimes to see if the
Stop
team can
talking.
get to the result. Right. Exactly. At the end of the day. So, yeah,
Well,
exactly.
that's the just stop talking. But that wasn't that you, by the way.
I was going to say, I think that was very Freudian right there.
That was just perfect.
It's like,
No,
this
I
was a
mean
mistake
that.
asking him,
Right. Stop talking, but also,
but also keep talking.
yeah. Well, the other thing is like you were saying, like what maybe those people need to learn, or they need to have those ideas come up, or at some point you point on them. And then the day, as a leader, as an owner of a company, to me, it doesn't matter if it was my idea or the team's. I would rather have the team's idea. You know what I mean? Like, I know there's certain areas I know better, but there's a lot of times it takes them longer and then they get there, right? But
Yeah.
that's like them
But
doing
that's how
it.
you grow your
Right.
business, right? The scalability
Right.
factor is in the greater scheme of things, letting them get there, or letting them figure it out their way, which may be different than your way, as long as they figure it out, allows you also to go do the things that you need to do and you probably should be doing more of, that you're not doing currently, right? Because
Right.
again, we all have a limited amount of bandwidth. So,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, hugely
Exactly.
important. I also think it's a great way to attract talent. If you're
Mhm.
creating a culture where people are, solutions are asked of people. People don't come with just problems, come with problems and solutions, and you're given the space to create those solutions. And you're also given the space to fail. I think this is a huge part of communication. Is ideation is important. I think to
Mhm.
what you just said. I think there are things that I'm an expert, or that's aggressive. I know things more than other people know, but there are plenty of things that other people know more than I know, right?
Oh
And I
yeah.
think, I don't necessarily separate myself out from there's the team and there's me. I am a part of the team. I play a role on the team. Everybody plays a role on the team. And I think really making sure that you're giving the people who you hired, that space to be experts, to be talent, to let their talent shine, because this is what they should know probably more than you do, even if you've been doing it longer. Doesn't necessarily mean you necessarily know more.
Yeah, I look at it as that our clients hire us to solve their problems. I'm hiring my employees to solve those problems, or they, you know what I mean? Like the idea
Mhm.
is that it's they need to or solve my problems. Did I say that right? I had this in my head and I looked at
I don't
something.
know.
It's our clients are hiring us to solve their problems. We're hiring our employees to solve those problems. Yes, that's right.
I don't know.
That's
You're
what I
going to
meant.
have to get with your marketing people and whiteboard that one, I think.
It was in my head, Jason. It was
It
good. It
sounded
was
great in your
so
head.
good. It was so good. Well, no, I mean, you are hiring these people to solve that
Yeah,
your
you are
problem, right?
100%.
Because you're not going to solve all your clients' problems. You're going to grow and stuff like that. If you want to be a single entrepreneur, that's fine. But if you want to have a
Hmm.
bigger agency and do those, there's problems to solve. You're not
For
going to be
sure.
the one that solves them.
For sure.
So
Um,
that's kind of
I
where
think
I was going with that.
I think the other thing is too, and I'm going to do a huge generalization here, although I think this really applies all over the place. But I think one of the things that I think the sophistication of the labor force is something else that we need to take into account. I think everybody's been through the ringer for the last few years. I think we've got a lot of children of the financial crisis coming into the job market.
Yeah.
I think you've got a lot of people who were born after 9/11 coming into the job market in the next few years as well, which is kind of crazy. And I think these people have I think if you're not vulnerable and authentic and transparent as a leader when you're communicating with them, it's really, really difficult. Like they can smell the bullshit. Sorry
Yeah.
if you have to edit that out, but like they can smell it. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things where um, you know, I get asked a lot by other managers sometimes on our teams, because I'll meet with somebody 30 days after they get hired because I don't want them burdened with like, oh, here's another executive I have to talk to while I'm trying
Yep.
to learn everything. So like 30 days in, I generally meeting them for the first time. I'm not always involved in the hiring process for everybody. And in that meeting, I usually share notes with the management team about people about that meeting. Hey, this is what I found out about the onboarding process, what they liked, what they didn't, what we
Yep.
can do better, all these things, right? And every now and then I get these things like, how did you get so much out of this person? Like they barely spoke, a word to me when I met them or when I was on with them or whatever. And I said it's because I go first. Like I think you've got to demonstrate that that this is a place where we are sharing, that in order to succeed as a team, collaboration is more than just like I write a piece of code and I push it and you take it and you
Yeah.
pull it down and you like
And
that's
just
not,
being open. Yeah, and being
100%.
open, right? Yeah, like being open and vulnerable. Like I think that's the best thing you can do, like being totally vulnerable to your employee and just like, hey,
Yeah.
there's some stuff happening. This is what life looks like, you know? It's like,
I think for us, it's great because, or a crowd favorite, it's great because it's part of our brand.
yep.
It's part of our brand. It's like in our name. Like that's part of being the crowd favorite is that you are very vulnerable and transparent. Like when you screw up, you're the first one out there saying, hey, I screwed up. You're not sitting there going, oh, well, it was, these factors or that factors like a lot of people do. Doesn't mean we're any less or more talented than other people, but it's just a different way of communicating. And then of course, I'll bring it back to what we've talked about a couple times already, which is, once I sort of get that ball rolling and quote unquote sort of warm up the room for the person, I shut up. I
Yeah.
just shut up and let them fill the room with air. Like you will be a better leader and manager for your team if you listen a lot more than if you talk. And I think that's
Mhm.
something that I definitely have had to learn over the years.
It's all about listening.
And I guess the last thing I would say about this promoting communication or what I call hyper communication, not over communication, because you want it to be really focused. Because I think you're right. Sometimes 3 words does beat 3 sentences, does beat 3 paragraphs, does beat 3 pages, and so on and so forth. But I think a lot of this comes down to like your hiring process, going
Mhm.
beyond just like, oh, can you code? Can you design? Can you project manage? How do you communicate? And I think we're very intentional, and I've been able to help a lot of folks like implement maybe a little bit different types of interview questions as you're going through the process. so that you can get some demonstration around how people communicate in different situations too. Like, to say people communicate the same all the time across every situation is also just not human. That's not how we are, right? So
Yeah, we actually when we're hiring, I don't care about your resume because I can look that up on LinkedIn. It's can you give me? I actually try to require them to do cover letters.
yeah,
Um,
that's a great
and
thing
it's
to
a
do.
funny, weird thing because first of all, listen, English is my second language, and I always been made fun of the way I write whatever else, but it has to do with the rest of the crew because the rest of the crew actually writes really, really well. But I want him to, clear communication in writing is one of those things that's very important because that gives you it's the way of thinking, right? It's just like you
Hmm.
thinking through it. And yes, we said, three well-written sentences are better than, ginormous thing, but sometimes you need that whole thing to explain
Sure.
everything else. Anyway, but yes, that's it's
I
kind
also think like this communication stuff is part of it's part of your branding. It's part of your
of
marketing strategy too, right? I mean,
always.
I think finding communication fit in the hiring process, um, that's true culture fit when you really think about it. It's more important than whether you like the same IPA or the same football team or the same whatever, like same cars, same movies. It's really about like because there's communication style, right? And there aren't
Mhm.
good or bad ones. They're just different ones. And if your brand is very like very approachable, very friendly, very accessible, all that kind of stuff, or very warm, you could have somebody on your team who has a really sharp, like acerbic sense of humor, like almost on the verge on the border of snarky. And personally, I may find it hilarious, and I have no personal problem with how they communicate, but they can't represent the brand communicating like that because that's not how we communicate at work.
And we
Not
have
with
that.
not with
Like we
each other
have
and not with clients. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we have tons of snarkiness. Like for some reason, not reason, but I know it kind of attracts it where we're kind of all snarky and stuff like that. But also, like a lot of us have been together for a very long
Right,
time,
but
so we
but
kind of
I'm
like
saying snarky isn't bad if snarky
no,
is part
yeah,
of like the culture, and snarky gets derogatory, but I don't mean snarky in a bad way. I just mean like, it's a
yeah,
little bit
no.
sarcastic, it's a little dry, it's a little edgy,
When it's
and
internal, yes. When it's external to clients, no.
yeah,
Also, when we hire somebody new, we actually watch what they say or what we say and how like what the reaction back and forth is. And
mhm,
usually with what happens is that person says something funny and we're like, okay, so we got it. Like there's sort of that because
right,
especially for us, like we're gonna be 13 this year. Most
sure,
of us know each other for long. Like our director of marketing I know each other for 20 odd years. You know what I mean? Like we know each other for a very, very long time. So you get kind of like, this is what we do, and very different than you're hiring new people, and you're like,
right.
can I say that? And not that like we say something like bad, but like sometimes you're like, my snarkiness
No, but it's also like
my snarkiness might not like be well reacted to.
it's tone and tenor, right, too, and
Right.
also, to your point, a lot gets lost in translation in the written word, right? So even on Slack, you don't know tone, and that's one of the things why where if you're culturally consistent with your tone and your tenor, people shouldn't be assuming things outside of what the tone and the tenor expectation is. Like there shouldn't be
Right.
like oh wait, did he mean that in a snarky way? Did she mean that in a
Right.
sarcastic way? If that's not part of your culture, you're not even thinking. You really shouldn't probably even be thinking that. But if you're seeing that kind of seep in, then maybe there are some cracks in that foundation you have to pay attention to.
Correct.
Um,
All
but
right,
anyway, that's
Jason.
it.
That was a good show, buddy.
Yeah, it
I think
was,
we might be
man.
ready for some guests, maybe.
We're gonna have some guests on coming up very soon. Some of our closest friends and colleagues who do this for a living. Also, they want to bring some of their own perspectives and some of their own topics to the audience. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think we got it down, and then we'll just invite those. All right, Jason. I will see you next week, buddy.
All right, bud. Thank you.